Welcome to the Love Beyond Limits podcast, where we celebrate love, intimacy, and everything in between. I am Ameenah Asante.
And I'm Kyla Black.
And together,
we'll explore the realms of relationships, sexuality, and queer experiences.
Hey, girlfriend.
Hey, girlfriend.
It's good to be back.
Always feels good to be back. It's like coming home.
Indeed. All right, so today we get to record our traits of toxic and healthy relationships.
Please tell us what is the noise we're hearing in the background.
That is my Labradoodle having a very intense journey. Perfectly timed to begin at the start of the podcast. It'll be over soon.
Great. Thank you for just letting us know what that was. Okay, so I think you said that today we get to record our conversation about relationships.
Yes.
And focusing on both traits that are unhealthy and or toxic, and conversely also healthy traits. And perhaps some ones in both categories that are, I won't say lesser known, but just maybe less highlighted or pointed out when people are talking about healthy and unhealthy relationships.
Yes, indeed.
Where would you like to start, love?
Yeah, so really the point of this particular episode is, I know that I have had the experience of being in relationships that at the end of the day, they weren't healthy. There were aspects that weren't okay that I allowed myself to be in, and there are also, some of those same relationships that had like some great things to them, especially initially. And so really the point is to help to eliminate some of that gray area and think about things subjectively, the only way that we really can about this, but look at it as a spectrum, like the spectrum of healthy relationships, right? We've got one side that's like super healthy, all systems are go, and the other side of it is like toxicity, and these particular traits are not good. And so just identifying those is really important.
Yeah. Agreed. And I love that you are reminding everyone that it's a spectrum and that we get to move away from the binary question of is this healthy or unhealthy, right? Or is this healthy or toxic? And as if there's just two choices, and that doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for all of the humanity that exists in the larger spectrum. Because just like you said, in most relationships that people feel are unhealthy, there are still good parts, and those are the parts that have most people stay. And so it's never all one thing for the most part.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so I will list a couple of these toxic relationship traits, and you join in with some as well. Great.
Okay.
All right, so for the first one is really just like an acknowledgement that there are no perfect relationships, right? But when you get down to it, when you look at what are the particular keys in relationship that start to really erode relationships over time, it's the small things. It is absolutely the small things. And so when you have relationships that you can reflect on, he just got up and moved and then just gave the biggest like old man groan. The Amish.
Amish?
You've never heard us say that we think that, Topaz is Amish? Amish in a black family?
No. This is him. I'm going to say it wrong. Never mind. Like when it goes out, when he hits 18.
Oh, Rumspringa. Yeah, this is Rumspringa with a black family.
And back to you. So you're saying, just to kick us off, as you take us through some initial ideas about what are some toxic / unhealthy traits, but reminding us all that there's no such thing as a perfect relationship, and that it can often be a buildup of smaller things, smaller behaviors, patterns, etc., annoyances, idiosyncrasies, that building up can start to erode connection and relationships. And when we say small, we don't mean unimportant. And we don't mean invalidating or to minimize it, and that it shouldn't be a big deal, or that it shouldn't be something that bothers you. It's really just to differentiate between the more perhaps obvious, if that's even fair to say, since this is subjective, but perhaps the more someone yelling or being physically harmful to you, which most people would tend to agree that that's not healthy, versus annoying things that are annoying, right? But builds up of a lot of those things. Doesn't equal a lot of satisfaction sometimes.
Yeah, agreed. Another aspect of these more unhealthy, toxic traits really are dependencies.
How do you mean?
So this really straddles the fence. Think codependencies.
Dependencies. And that can be defined in a handful of different ways. And so, again, if we think about things on a spectrum, you can have what gets referred to as codependent on one side, and then on the other side, like ultra independent. And codependent also has become quite a buzzword. I think that means it ends up not always being used accurately. And so I'm not even going to sit here tonight and try to be accurate about it, because I think there's actually a lot of ways to think about what it means. And I'm not an expert on codependency specifically, and so I won't claim to just tell you, here's the official definition. However, if you think about the spectrum of ways in which people are dependent, at least and this actually really can dip into, I don't want to go tangential, but in much of, I suppose, westernized or Americanized culture, there is a high value on independence, right? And so what we might even call codependent and look at it as bad, in other cultures or places, that might even be the goal, and that's what's expected, is to be dependent on each other in certain ways. Always taking that into account, but the ways in which a type of dependency can feel or become unhealthy is when people stop feeling like they can really have an individuality and don't necessarily feel like that there's room and space to have all of their feelings, because it's going to be too much of an impact on their partner. Or they can't really, and we'll get into needs a little more, but part of the codependency is that we can't both have needs. We can't take care of each other's needs. Our needs are dependent on each other. We can only have this if the other person is in tow. And it just becomes very intertwined in a way that people can lose a sense of themselves and their own personhood, and often feel like bad or guilty, like, oh, well, I can't feel this or do this or want this because my partner's going to feel XYZ. And then they'll sort of shrink themselves down as a result. Whereas hyper, again, subjective, but ultra independent is the like, I don't need anybody. I can do it on my own. I'll feel through it on my own. I'll make my own decisions. I don't need help with anything. I'm so self-sufficient. And in my experience, those folks are so proud and feel really good and grounded in how independent and self-sufficient they are, because then they don't have to depend on anyone. But for some, and many people actually, it can often come from a place of having been very significantly, sometimes even traumatically, really let down. And they learned early on that they can't actually rely or depend on people to be there for them in significant ways. That is sometimes even a reaction, unknowingly, to never wanting to be let down again. And so somewhere in the middle, if there's a middle on the spectrum, it would be interdependence, where generally as a people, human beings, we get to rely on those around us, right? We're not here, and we were never intended to exist here in a vacuum, in a cave by ourselves, right? We have survived as a species because of our interdependence and interactive nature of humanity in relationships, in communities, all over the place. So as it relates to needs, let's just acknowledge we all have needs. Period. Some of us are very aware of and comfortable with the fact we have needs, and some of us detest the fact that we have needs because we associate that with being needy. And needy has also come to have a negative connotation and a stigma of bad. Nobody wants to be needy. But if needy means we have needs, then we're all needy in some kind of way. And so for people who, depending on how dependent or independent or interdependent or codependent people show up in relationships as, that can really influence how much people are willing to prioritize and value their own needs. And if we think again on a spectrum, right, you have some people who are so focused on their own needs that they don't consider, think about, or do anything in relation to a partner's needs. And then you have other people who have no clue that they have any needs of their own other than to make their partners happy and try to fulfill their partner's needs and please their partner, accommodate, do whatever they can do so their partner feels happy, fed, satiated, etc. Right? And they don't see themselves as having needs. But we all have needs, as we just spoke about. So of course they do. And so then we get to wonder what happened to that person's needs and where are they and how come they're not part of this relationship. And so again, any end of a spectrum, there's going to tend to be some more unhealthiness that can, also become toxic depending on how polar they can be. We're not really saying all of this stuff is bad and unhealthy, toxic, and then later we'll talk about what's good, because it's all in the same conversation, right? So I think, when you are ignoring your own needs, that is a flag. That's a red flag. And I think that it becomes very gray area for people, and I'm thinking about it as a yellow flag, where I think some people are like, oh, well, I know I have needs, but this thing is more important, or what they need is more important. And yeah, there's going to be times when that's definitely true, right? We don't all have the exact level of importance of needs all the time necessarily, but we all need whatever we need. And we all are allowed to have our needs, and we're allowed to have our needs met. And we should never feel bad for needing what we need. And I work with a lot of people. I know a lot of people. I work with a lot of people. I have been this person where I have felt bad for needing what I needed. I have felt needy for needing what I needed. I have felt too much for needing what I needed. I have felt probably ashamed at certain points. I've felt guilty. I have felt too much, not enough, all over the spectrum as it related to my own needs. And that is not helpful. That does not make for the fullest, most satisfying, intimate of relationships. I'll pause there.
Yes, there's so much to that part of the conversation. I mean, needs and dependencies and how they work hand in hand, and people can really get lost in it. Like, in my experience, it's part of why people come out of a long-term relationship and they're just like, whoa, like, this other part of, like, this massive part of my life was just ripped away, because there's dependency and interconnectedness, but really a losing of yourself in those relationships. Tricky.
Quite. Lots of healing needed and finding oneself again sometimes.
Yeah. So next on the list is communication and fear of response and reaction. And so in every relationship that does not work, you can typically find one major common denominator, and that is poor communication in some way, shape, or form. And if you want to take it a couple steps further, you've got the type of communication where one person or both people are actually fearful of how the other person will react or respond. And that can be pretty scary, pretty terrifying if you have noticed that you are altering your words, if you are having to rehearse what it is you're going to say on a moment by moment, day by day, in that time frame, you recognize that you can't speak freely. It can be really, really frightening to understand that you have genuine fear of these reactions and these responses. And this is a very, very big red flag.
Yes. What do you think would have someone not be aware that this is a flag, but be in?
Yeah, so I would absolutely say that this would be a pattern that you could trace communication back to this person's childhood, where they had to contort and really just monitor everything that they said in relationships with major caregivers. And so as a result, it's just they have been conditioned to really fall into relationship patterns such as this and do that constant, self-monitoring, which in itself it's a skewed version of people pleasing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, again, in the spirit of the spectrum, right, on one end, you can have, people who experienced some kind of abuse as a child, physical, verbal, mental, emotional, etc., where they literally feared for their lives, for their safety, for their bodily integrity. And then, maybe further away from abuse, but just unpredictability in the home, right? Just instability or unpredictability of a caregiver, of their moods, of their habits. There could be, substance abuse things, right? There could just be depressed parents or other mental health things going on. There could just be high stress about economics or job or where are we living? Do we have enough resources? There can just be also just people with their own generational stuff, right? Where your caregiver, you just don't know, right? And what comes to mind when I'm even saying that on a personal note is not, I think about my, and she will never watch this podcast, but I think about my gymnastics coach growing up who was a very major adult figure in my upbringing from probably age 6 to 18. I spent as much time around her at my gym as I did my parents, just with my training. And she was so unpredictable. And sometimes she was so nice. And her praise and approval felt like everything. And then other days, she would snap at you and be mean and yell at you and have zero empathy and could care less if you were not doing okay. Didn't care if you seemed to get hurt. Didn't care if you were afraid. Like, just could care less. And was so neglectful and unsupportive. And the result, we all had different experiences, my peers and I. But I think about that as this formative figure, and she wasn't my parent. Thank goodness. And so then imagine we have the parents or any major adult in your life who is unpredictable. We learn ways to work around it. And so fast forward to intimate relationships, there's so many ways this can happen where I'm just accommodating, right? Maybe we even pat ourselves on the back for being so adaptable and accommodating and flexible. Oh, well, I don't really care. I mean, whatever they want, right? Or, oh, well, it's not that important. I don't really need to advocate for what I need because they're just going to get mad and it's not that big of a deal anyway.
Yeah, it's an extreme version of like choose your battles, where it's like choose your battles every single moment of every single day, and it's scary.
It struck me when you said rehearsing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think it makes me think about people who are in relationships with narcissists and perhaps other personality disorders who come with some of the unpredictability
Yeah.
amidst other character traits. But just the rehearsing and editing and amending of what one wants to say, whether it's about a big issue or a seemingly small issue, but just like so much work to not trigger someone else, right? That is a flag. If you are working that hard in your relationship to not set anyone off, this is a flag. We're not sitting here saying carte blanche, it's unhealthy and it's toxic and get out, or that it's bad, but more that that behavior pattern is a flag to look at and to be curious about and maybe explore. Yeah.
So, similarly, there is the other piece around partial trust as a sign of unhealthy relationship patterns. And partial trust is interesting. I would define this as being able to, like, if you had to answer, a questionnaire, like, do you trust your partner? How much do you trust your partner? In what areas of your life do you trust your partner? And so, like, any kind of delineating from just the carte blanche, I trust my partner, then you get into, like, oh, I trust my partner to take care of our kids, but when it comes to, what, like, having them hear me or see me, I don't trust them in that way. And so just assigning trust in one department and actually realizing that you do not have trust in these other areas can be really, really unhealthy.
Yeah, and another flag, right? And again, a great person, you know, I mean, just, oh, they're so great and they do all these good things and they're so helpful and contributing and what a great provider, and right, can have a really reliable provider, partner, spouse who does a lot of the things that are needed. And then there's an area or two where you just don't trust them at all. Right. And I don't know about for you, Ameenah, but I've had relationships where I experienced that, where the scale was much higher in the I can rely on this person in these areas. And then there are some other areas that are just about me that I don't trust. And I often probably even really invalidated myself about not trusting, because I could look, oh, but look at all these other ways that this person shows up. And look at all these other ways that, or look at all these other things this person's doing for our home, for our family, for our livelihood. Is it that I don't trust that person? Maybe, right? And just sort of second guessing myself and doubting myself about it. But in reality, that was really true, that trust wasn't there, and it was sad to come to realize that that was true. But
Yeah.
again, you know, if for however long I was willing to suppress or reduce the importance of a certain need I had, then I could make it okay to just not have trust in that area.
Yeah.
So, and this ties back to needs.
Getting close to home here.
How so?
Yeah, just thinking about, my marriage specifically, knowing that my ex-husband, was a pretty solid dad. He did a good job fathering, parenting his children, and also related to anything regarding me emotionally, physically, communicatively. There's almost nothing that I could count on regarding trust with those things. It's frightening. And I progressed through that relationship simply by saying, many people would love to have this level of dad in the house. And I should just stick it out because he's doing a great job here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here we both are. Yeah. So, I mean, I think I'm sure most of us have heard that lying is not good in relationships, and that honesty and trust is important. And I don't think you need us to sit here and say that to you as if it's not known. However, I think that, I think in the same way that trust isn't actually totally black and white, right? Lying, trust, mistrust, honesty, dishonesty. Like there's some gray area in there. But I think, what becomes a flag is when you see patterns, right? Most people, I will say, and I will stand by this, most people have told a lie to their partners at some point in their relationship. Maybe a little lie, maybe a big lie, maybe a short-term lie, maybe a longer-term lie, right? And they all have some ounce of potential problematicness,
Yeah.
right? But once in a while, here or there, I wouldn't label as a wholehearted problem. Duplicitous behavior, pattern, secrecy, twisting of truths. And I think for me, this is very connected to a partner's ability or inability to be accountable and responsible for their wrongdoings, if you will, right? And so people lying, oh, well, I just did this because this, or I didn't do this at all, or that's not what I said, right? And just that's not necessarily dishonest behavior, but I'm just, there's a whole gray space of unaccountability. And then there's, of course, outright lying, cheating, stealing,
Gaslighting.
gaslighting, all sorts of not taking responsibility for one's own actions and choices and behaviors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got two more on the list for unhealthy, toxic traits. And this one is really becoming a bit more well known these days, but this really, I don't feel was a thing even like a decade ago where people in a mainstream way acknowledge this. And I think it's really great that this is getting more recognition. So it's simply the heightened state of your nervous system. So if you are like relatively cool as a cucumber and just feeling, good about your day to day, and you get in the space with your significant other and your body is on alert, this is something that we get to pay attention to. So this is not major. And this is not a condition that our bodies are meant to live in. You are subjecting yourself to, really fight or flight, fawn and freeze, all of the parasympathetic responses of the body on a consistent basis if that is how you are responding to a particular person.
Yep. Yeah, I think it doesn't need to be, yeah, like explained further. I think I would just add to that, and I think we talked about this at some point of noticing that, this too is a flag that sometimes people in relationships where this happens, have a higher likelihood of drinking together or taking gummies together or engaging in some kind of substance use and enjoyment. And that's where they tend to like each other best, or that's when they have good communication, or that's when they laugh the most. That's when they laugh, period. That's when they feel at ease with each other. And sure, right? There could be a place for different substances in different contexts, etc. However, if anyone ever feels like that's the only way that they can feel at ease with a partner is if they're engaged in some kind of substance use, then that's a flag, right?
Definitely.
It's not that, oh, well, we have a good time and then sometimes, we take something or do something and it's elevated. Like, sure, that's the purpose of a drug or alcohol is you have an elevated experience in some way. Or this is the only way we can feel relaxed together and otherwise we're just like on edge around each other. Right? Like, again, it kind of comes back to dependencies in a certain way. This is a different kind of dependency, but different from depending on each other if you're also depending on an external source or substance in order to be around your partner.
Yeah.
Those are flags.
Yeah. Would you like to tell us about the last one?
Sure. So Esther Perel calls this artificial intimacy, and presumably there are other terms for this prior to this age of technology. But it really, in this age of technology, we have become so accustomed to and accepting of distracted attention from our partners that we give and that we get. And we are all guilty of it in some way. Unless you don't use a device. And if you don't, amazing. And please comment because I'd love to know how you get through life that way. Truly. But yeah, the idea of this artificial intimacy is around people, in a conversation. Someone comes home from work and you're, hey, how was your day? Let's catch up. Or put the kids to bed, hanging out on the couch. And that's your time to catch up. And that's your time to reconnect after the day. That's your time to chat about things you need to chat about or just hanging out and having a good time. Right? And I don't know about you, but, has anyone experienced talking to a partner and they're looking at their phone? And they're saying, yeah, wait, what? Oh, okay, yeah, And then they're either scrolling or they're reading or they're doing something where they're just looking at their device, right? And again, we're all so used to it because we're constantly holding a device. Even if we're not looking at it, we're holding it. And even that, I think I realize, even stirs up my nervous system at this point. Because to me, it's almost, I can interpret it almost as, well, I have your attention in this moment, but at any point I might lose it. And I don't know when that's going to be, so I better get in what I have to say quickly. Because at any point you're holding your phone as if you're, going to turn away, right? And it's this, right, this idea that, oh, we're here, we're talking, we're connecting. And some people are, again, depending on your connection style and what feels good to you and what you're used to and what you want and what your needs are around connection and how you like to connect and how you feel loved and how you want to love your partner. All of this plays into it. Also, that experience alone, we talked about this earlier about the small things that can over time erode connection and interrupt intimacy, interrupt the possibility of even creating or sustaining intimacy, right? Is having this distracted attention. And look, there's a lot to be distracted by. Absolutely. However, it's even the awareness of, oh, hang on, I'm just reading this article. I'm aware you want to talk to me. Give me 5 minutes, and then I'm going to put it down and give you my attention, right?
Yeah. It reminds me of when we first started dating, how we both recognized this as a major trigger for us, and how we wanted to intentionally be in the relationship and not have that be the experience. Like, we wanted to ensure that our time together was on us. And of course, there's moments in the day where we're transitioning between activities, and, we both have children. And so, like, looking at the phone is necessary. But for the most part, our time together is really intentional and free from devices. And it's great.
I love seeing you in person because it's actually when I use my phone the least, and it's so relieving.
Totally.
But yeah, I mean, if I think about that, like I can't really remember any conversation we've had where one of us we don't talk to each other when someone's on the phone unless it's like, "Hey, can you look up this restaurant or what's going
Mm-hmm.
on tonight?" That's different, right? That's like an intentional use of a tool, which is great. And Lord knows, like we're both on our phones a lot in general, so we're not knocking it. But there's such a different experience in my nervous system to
Mm-hmm.
have the trust in this area
Yeah.
that you are going to give me your attention when I'm talking to you. And it makes me feel like what you think that what I'm saying is important. Whether I'm telling you like which nail polish I chose or about my grief,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Like big or small. It feels like you care.
Yeah.
And I know that plenty of people care about what their partners are saying, even as they're distracted by their phones.
Mm-hmm.
People are don't not care. One doesn't equal the other, but I think it's distracted and it dilutes connection and dilutes intimacy. So it's a flag that doesn't mean it's a toxic situation, and it may not even be a red flag, but I would offer that it is a flag in terms of the impact it can have on long-term intimacy. So that was not heavy at all. And, not that we only should talk about light, fluffy cotton candy things. This feels super important, but I feel a heaviness like in me
Mm-hmm.
as we're having this part of the conversation. How about you?
Definitely. It's one thing to be a practitioner and not have the lived experiences to just rattle off a list of things, but like, I have experienced almost all of these things.
Mm.
And so, yeah, the heaviness is there, and it's a sign of growth and, doing of one's work. When I can listen to the list, I can read the list, talk about it, and not feel like a sense of like shame or beat up
Mm.
about having been in relationships like this that had these traits.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think the growth piece is so important and worth celebrating, right? Because there's so much that you and, I in my relationships, there's so much that we've gotten to learn as a result of being in them that we also get to bring to this new relationship,
Hmm.
right? Where we know a lot of our stuff.
Yeah.
That's really helpful and part of, I think, sort of the green flags, right, that delves into what feels healthy and what I would say is part of defining healthy relationships is celebrating that growth,
Hmm.
right? Is that we're not here to fix each other. I'm not here to say, oh, I'm here to like change you. I don't like this about you. This needs to change. It's more like, and obviously, as we've talked about in our Virgo Pisces episode, there are some things that, we might want to change about each other, but we're not looking to, right? Like, we understand also that we come with the things we come with, and we choose to accept that, and we get to talk about any places that things don't feel good and that it doesn't feel like it's working, but we're not inherently trying to change or fix anything about each other, right? And
Hmm.
part of that is a result of work we've done in from previous relationships, right? Where we can celebrate and support each other's growth even as we continue growing right here.
Well, yay, not that the previous part of the conversation wasn't extremely important, but I'm happy that we also get to touch on the healthy traits as well that really no one is talking a whole lot about. Like these are newer parts of this conversation, beyond like the good communication,
Right?
right?
Like, what does good communication even mean? And we're not going to sit here and go through it, but like, good communication is so vague. It
Yeah,
couldn't be more vague.
yeah, totally. Okay, so one of my favorites on this list is it sounds so middle school, but I think it's just so fun. One of the signs of a healthy relationship is actually liking your person. And, obviously, we can think about our significant others and be like, yeah, I love this person. I've loved this person. I've respect for this person. But there's a different differentiator that's super important is actually liking them and like enjoying their presence
Hmm.
and them feeling that you enjoy their presence and you like looking forward to spending time with them, you engaging and having fun, there being this solid foundation of friendship.
Yeah, it's really helpful to like someone and to like them like them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, check,
Yeah.
check. Do you like me or do you
Ooh,
like
girl.
me?
Ooh, girl, I like you. And I'm happy to do that big check mark on that note you just passed me in class. And I might even like do a secret like kiss on the note before I send it back with a little, gloss.
Ooh, fancy.
Please.
Okay. So this one is plus and minus actually, right? So we're talking about mind reading and how some view this as a healthy component of relationships, not as in it should be there actually at all, but just that many couples who exhibit a whole array of healthy behaviors that there can be a certain level of knowing and intuiting
Hmm.
what someone might say, even feeling into what they might feel. And for some, it looks like finishing each other's sentences or guessing what they're going to say or just having a sense of, oh, I bet, I mean, for some, I think it's very connected to empathy and attunement. And those are definitely healthy ingredients to have in relationship. And I think the minus around the mind reading is more in a, oh, I know what you're going to say, right? It's more in the making the assumption that because I think I know this person so well, or because we've been in relationship for 10 years or 15 years, I can already imagine what you're going to say when I say this thing. I can guess what you're going to respond with. And even if I'm right 80% of the time, I actually really limit who that person is if
Hmm.
I'm trying to mind read and guess because I'm really not giving them a chance to be a person. And I'm
Hmm.
assuming that they've already hit their limit and there's nothing that could possibly be different ever, ever again. And that sucks.
Yeah.
Right? Conversely, though, at some point, I remember, I suppose this was in marriage. It must have been because that was my longest relationship. But I remember at some point coming to feel more unwanting of a mind reading kind of dynamic of a let's not guess what the other one's going to feel. And I was very guilty of that. I did that all the time, not to anyone's service. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to try to assume less and ask more and just see what happens. Right. And there were plenty of times where my partner didn't like that I was asking and wished and preferred for me to know it or to infer it. And like, she didn't want to have to tell me. Like, well, what do you think? Don't you know? Kind of thing. And so it was like, and I was like, wait, no, like I'm trying to let you be a person
Yeah.
rather than
Pick
assume
me.
whatever, because then like I could be wrong and not that that's so terrible. But
Yeah.
how about I don't try to guess
Yeah.
and you just tell me?
Yeah.
So, pros and cons of the mind reading. But I think the plus and the healthy is where there is empathic awareness of your partner. And I do think that there's a very fun component to the finishing sentences when it's something you've talked about, or you have your private jokes, or you
Hmm.
have, right? There's sort of these things that just are very connecting.
Yeah, that's definitely some of our superpowers as a couple is the comedic portion of that.
Hmm.
Like how we can take a joke that will last for days and or like months prior and just like weave it in effortlessly into the conversation and like at the same time or in like similar ways. That's a lot of fun.
That is. I do like to finish your sentences sometimes and with things that are completely not at all what you're going to say. And like sometimes that's really fun. Although sometimes it's really not fun for you because I'm just like speedy. And so
Yeah.
I'm like, I think part of my, I'm like, okay, oh, this is what you're going to say. And I like fill in the blank and you're like, I wasn't there yet. Slow down. Just calling myself out on it, so I'm aware.
Love. So these next few come from a man named Michael Hunter, who does a lot of work with couples and other things, and his list has some fun things on it. So I wanted to add these in as well. Similar to, in contrast to what we shared earlier on the toxicity side, the nervous system resetting and resting when you're in connection with your partner, called limbic resonance, and this being something where you can actually feel your body just completely rest and release even when you're in shared space or shared time.
Yeah, it's just sort of ultimate experience of safety.
Yes.
I'm allowed to rest. I'm allowed to let go. I'm allowed to relax. There's no risk of just exhaling.
Also, that energy of them getting you, right? Where you don't need to explain yourself. And they're just right there, lock and step. Just they see you. And it's that ultimate experience of feeling and being seen.
It's so powerful and really not, I mean, not simple, but it feels like gold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It really does.
pretty affirming.
It really does.
Yeah. And he said this thing that I really liked about love being not a leash, but a launching pad.
Mm-hmm.
And I like even the imagery of that as well. That comes to my mind when I think about that, of really a solid relationship and safe feeling connection being a place, a jumping off point,
Mm-hmm.
rather than, it's where you can experience freedom actually, and freedom to grow and take risks and practice being courageous and brave in different places and having your person there.
Too good.
I
Yeah,
mean, some people want a leash, but that's a different kind of leash. And
just
that can be fun too.
just a little different.
Just a little different. For another podcast episode.
Indeed. And last but not least on our list of healthier traits,
Yeah,
we've
which we
got
kind of referenced earlier.
we did reference this earlier, but it's worth mentioning again on this side of it.
That important.
It really is the not fixing versus supporting your person and their growth. And not only the not fixing, I would add in the looking at the potential or being in a relationship with the potential of the person. And if they just take this class, if they just learn this thing, watch this video, journal, meditate more, they would then be. I
You're
would
saying
both
that you wouldn't encourage that route.
correct.
Okay, just to be
Correct.
clear, right.
Yes. Are we both itching at the same time? Because it's that alarming. Yes. And so the other side of it is the seeing them and just supporting their growth and whatever it looks like. Like recognizing that I'm in relationship with you, and if you never do anything else to improve or change, I am committed to you in in your current state, just in the way that I expect that you're committed to me. And that being the end of the sentence there.
Right. Yeah, it just has me think of, I wonder how many times I will apologize to my ex during the course of these episodes. That's okay. Just for how long I wanted to change her.
Mm,
I wanted, I wouldn't say fix. She wasn't broken. She's not broken. But how much of our, dynamic and patterns and her behaviors I wanted to change and thought could change and things like that. And I think that, fast forward many years, even before we separated, was finally coming to the acceptance of this is who we both are. Yes, we are both capable of learning new things, but we're essentially like, this is who we are, right? And if we're going to be in this relationship, we have to be able to embrace and accept what we come with and what we don't come with. And are we truly okay with that? And for those who can be okay with all of that and have their most important needs met and embrace the wholeness of someone, then great, right? Like, there's more longevity there. For us, we couldn't. We tried, but at the end of the day, the things we needed were not available.
Yeah.
No one could become a different person, and no one was wrong for it. Couldn't happen.
Yeah. I even at one point was engaged to someone, and I remember the internal piece of, yes, I could marry you, dot dot dot, if, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you don't want to say yes to someone when you're saying yes to the potential version that you think they could become in 3 to 5 years after a lot of hard work.
No, you don't want to do that. I'm so grateful for growth and clarity and understanding.
Me too. Me
That's
too.
truly.
Cheers.
But
L'chaim.
but when some of those yellow flags of like, I just love these, I love 70% of them, and not not recognizing that 30% that you can't get with, like, you don't have really the right, I would say, to demand that this be different, right? You just have to, like, either it's right for you or it's not right for you.
Cheers to growth and clarity.
Cheers. Where's your glass? Where's your glass? Are they matching?
Mine's purple. What color is yours?
Mine's purple and blue.
Yeah, I think they're in the same matching genre.
They are in the same fam. Love it. Maybe one day we'll have matching mugs.
Maybe. Make us some podcast mugs and we'll have some matching mugs.
I mean,
We'll see. Maybe I'll try to win the contest.
there you go. That's funny. Amazing.
Well, usually we say, well, this has been fun.
Mm-hmm.
Does that feel like that to you today?
No, this hasn't been fun. As in two Enneagram sevens, if you didn't know, this was a very hard for us to do.
I don't know about hard, but not fun.
Yes, this was, I know for me, I was ready to escape at some point mid podcast.
Well, I'm grateful you stayed.
Yeah, it's really just the sleepy mom syndrome.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Always. All hours of the day.
Yeah, girl.
Great. Well, I'm glad we did this.
We did it.
And if you're here, if you've stayed through with us throughout, I'm glad you are here too. And as always, we hope that anything we shared can help you on your own journey and perhaps support your growth and clarity
Yes.
as well.
Yes. All right. Until the next time.
Until the next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Love Beyond Limits podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, please feel free to subscribe and stay tuned for more episodes.
Be sure to follow us and join us next time.
I might you, and I have to pay.
Okay, we gotta do it. Be sure to follow us and join us next time as we continue to break boundaries and celebrate love in all its forms.